So, guys, what's object storage? Tell us a little bit about object storage and what that is.
Object storage is very exciting. We could talk for hours about this. Um, so
Let's,
so
shall we? I just
so
put on my
let's.
beanie and it's spinning.
So object storage is I call it a new way of representing data that literally will represent data as objects. And in the true sense of objects, you've got a core, a kernel of some data surrounded by a metadata, which can be, for example, a universal ID or information
So,
about the object itself.
how's an object different than a file, though, Skip? I mean, let's break it down to the basics. And to be blunt, this is an area where my own definitions start to, get a little more gray. I mean, what is the difference between storing an object on a piece of disk-based storage and storing a file on a piece of disk-based storage? Because it is a very radically different approach, is it not?
It is really radical. So in the past, I may have a long piece of video represented as one file sitting on perhaps a RAID system somewhere. On an object storage based system, that same video file will be exploded into maybe a lot of different objects. Now, once data is represented as objects, I can recreate them on the fly. Or here's where it gets really cool. Let's say a chunk of those objects that represent that whole file is missing. The objects themselves can essentially interpolate that missing information on the fly. And that's something that, as you say, that is completely science fiction and a completely different way to represent data. And what it means is that I can now, in a very liquid and fluid way, move data around. I can say an internal disk drive or a component on my system fails, no problem at all. On the fly, the system can recreate any missing objects. And the end result is that you can represent that same information at far higher levels of resiliency than are possible with something like a RAID 6 system.
So, like in a RAID, right, the whole point of RAID was so that we could sustain the loss of one or two drives, say. With RAID 6, we can lose two drives in a RAID set. So we have these, say, 10 or 12 drives all working together essentially to what the RAID itself sees as one drive, right? It's the LUN. It's the thing
Right.
that is on the inside of the box, but to anything outside of the RAID controller, it kind of looks like it's working as one drive. But I guess, is it fair to say, Skip, in the way that RAID was a level of redundancy for your data at the level of looking at, say, drive failures, object storage now is a much more flexible redundancy system that can even sustain, say, the loss of entire chassis, if not even facilities worth of storage, because it's like the next level up, and we can be much more flexible in terms of how we set up these redundancy schemes, and always ensure that even at larger levels of equipment failure and loss, without even having to resort to backup systems per se, we can preserve the legitimacy of the entire data set, because while it's not the exact algorithm that RAIDs use to generate parity data, that redundancy data, there is something kind of analogous to that happening in the background that the object system is generating. Is that right?
There is. So if you were challenged to build, say, a large volume with RAID, you would literally have to build that probably in one rack or a couple of nearly adjacent racks. But you can, in fact, span cities. You can span systems in multiple cities. Perhaps an LA office and a San Jose office could all be part of this, could all be part of one object storage based system like Lattice. So it completely opens up new possibilities of how you can store, as Alex calls, an extended online volume that can be available to all of your users in some pretty exciting ways.
So let's. Oh, I just wanted to let's quickly try to break this down into a specific scenario, right? This is where a lot of our clientele, especially some of the bigger clients that we work with, I think are struggling with right now, right? Because they may have multiple facilities around the country or around the planet, in the case of a number of the folks that we deal with. And, they have sets of users who each have their own storage silos. Say they have a bunch of different StoreNext SANs. And, They know that there's files that are essentially identical to one another spread across these multiple facilities. They know there's times there's an asset in one facility that would be useful to people in another, but the other people aren't quite sure that it exists even, so they may end up essentially rebuilding something like a promo piece from scratch that they maybe, if they had had some insight or even accessibility to the other person's storage, they could have just gotten a hold of and saved some time. So paint the picture. Let's say someone is looking to move towards a more centralized data storage model for their media assets, but they want to give visibility into that system, for multiple sets of users, and they want to somehow leverage this redundancy even across physical sites that object storage can offer. Paint an overview picture of what does that start to look like. What are the building blocks of quantum stuff, whether it's Starnet Storage Manager or Lattice? How does one begin to assemble those into the type of infrastructure I just described to accomplish all of those things?
Well, let's take it up a level, because that'll help get us to where we want to be. So just as you pointed out, Nick, the customers out there, the clients that you have, whether they have a single facility or multiple facilities, their workflows are usually locked to a facility. So the way it works is you have a number of client workstations, users out there connected to what they like to call an online storage, something they use every day. And this is where all their content resides. And then hopefully they have some type of a more resilient second copy, because a best practice says, especially with RAID, I hear this all the time. People say to me, or I'll say to someone, so how are you archiving this? How are you backing it up? And they say, well, I have RAID. I never need to back it up because that's safe. Well, it's not necessarily safe. It's great for online, but you should always have a second copy. And I hear people say to me, well, I archived it to tape, therefore that's my backup copy. And I say, well, if you moved it off your online storage on a tape, you had one copy, you made one copy, you still have one copy. And the problem is the resiliency of that copy, depending on how good the tape is, anything can happen. So the idea that you want to have more than one copy in more than one place is really important. And it gets more and more important as you have more and more content, because you tend to have more and more people touching it. And humans make mistakes, like erase things. This happens. And also your activity level on your archive goes up. So the building block pieces look like this. The workflow you have at your facility is going to have clients. Clients will be connected to online. Online will probably be connected to some kind of archive. What we do is we say, well, the archive usually is far away. It's hard to get to. It's tape. It's other things that you may get to. It's sometimes people put disks on shelves when they're small companies. Some people have a redundant copy of their RAID system and they shut it off, which is really the wrong thing to do, but we could talk about that for hours. But the idea here is that we've built this thing called Lattice, this object storage you guys were talking about. And as you said, Nick, the resiliency of this is, think of RAID at a different level. I always look at it as you have a bunch of boxes, you cut something into, say, 20 or 50 pieces, you take each piece and put it in a box and put the box somewhere, but guess what? You only need a few of those pieces to make the data that's on 50 of them. And depending on this, we call these durability policies. You could say, if I had 50 pieces, I only need 20 to actually get all my data back. So I could lose 30 pieces compared to something like RAID 6, where you can lose 2 pieces, and those pieces have to be hard drives that are in the same, as you called it, LUN. We could have these 50 pieces across thousands of hard drives, or across, as Skip said, across continents.
And let's remember that, like, these drives that we're talking about losing in a RAID set could be 6 or even 8 terabyte drives. I mean, that's a lot of data to lose at once and have to rebuild.
Absolutely. And the problem with that is, while you're rebuilding that data, and this is what people don't understand today, if you had a drive fail and you rebuild it, you have to use more horsepower in the rest of the disks to be able to deliver the content you're doing today and rebuild. So you're putting a heavy strain on the rest of the drives, and there's a chance you could have another drive fail. And if that happens in a RAID 6, you're still safe. But then those other drives that remain have to work even harder And if you had another drive fail, you'd lose all your data. And that's called a cascading drive failure. It's not uncommon as RAIDs age. So that's why people say to me a lot of times, well, I've had my RAID for 5 years. I'm going to shut it off and put it on the shelf and keep it. You can't do that. I mean, these things have a physical life of 3 to 5 years. You have to replace them. And the problem is you have to migrate the content off them onto something else, which again strains them real hard. So don't wait until they're just about ready to die and then copy the data over, migrate it over, because you're bound to kill the system you're on and you have a loss possibility. So what we've done is we've taken this idea of building this special purpose-built object storage called Lattice. It's super high performance for object storage. It is also very resilient, and it has unlimited scalability. So that same customer that has clients, they have online, we now, in the middle between their online and their archive, we put something that we call extended online in there. And this is really where the object storage, and this is the beauty of StorNext and Storage Manager, the object storage becomes a much more resilient repository where you can put your content, and it's connected, physically connected to your online. So unlike archive where you'd have to pull a tape off the shelf or you'd have to go and copy something from somewhere to somewhere else, this becomes an extension, and Storage Manager automagically moves your content between your online to this extended online, and it's more resilient. So I would say that if I'm a company today doing work and I have all my online work, let's say I'm doing episodic TV and I'm done with that show, I want to move it as quickly as I can to the Lattice object storage as an extended online, because it's actually safer in my extended online than it is in my online storage, my RAID storage. So I want to move it as quickly as I can, and knowing that object storage is nearly as fast as the online storage in data movement, I feel pretty safe in doing that. And that same facility in moving to extended online can do that even before you deliver the show. So, I'm going to break this up, and I'm going to give you a concept but a lot of people may not know, is that if you look at the time you ingest content in, you bring digital content into your online storage, then you do work and process on it, you do editing, you do color correction, you do audio sweetening. These are all what I'll call real-time operations. And in some cases, you could say ingest isn't really a real-time operation. You would say that editing, audio sweetening, color correction, and to some extent conforming, those are all real-time operations. But there are other non-real-time operations, all the way from archiving on ingest to delivery to proxy building transcode, which is a workflow operation. All these things don't have to happen in real time. In fact, most of them happen either faster than real time because you have a transcode farm, or they take longer than real time to actually happen, such as in delivery where you're transcoding to go out and go for some IP type of delivery. So the beauty of extended online is we take these non-real-time functions and we move those to the extended online to the Lattice object storage. And the difference between a Lattice object storage and your RAID storage is that Lattice has multiple ways in and out. What do I mean by that? So we connect all of the RAID storage directly to the clients with the technology, either fiber channel or Ethernet, but some type of front-end technology so they can touch that. But it's connected through this metadata controller, which is call it a traffic cop, to say who has access to what pieces of content. The Lattice object storage is different. So it has a few different ways in and out. One way it has in is directly to StorNext. It's fully seamless. So if it looks like it's there on your desktop in StorNext, it'll be there in your object storage. But guess what? It also has an IP capability with a controller we call an A10, and that gives you the ability to mount it directly to the internet, and so that you can connect it with users who are remote, pulling these objects off remotely through a technology called REST, or you can also connect it to other tools that you use for non-real-time applications, such as transcoders, delivery hubs, anything you need to do to get to your CDN, anything you need to do to be able to do delivery, or even from an ingest standpoint, you can connect this to a tape if you're ingesting from tape, or you can connect it to your primary storage and ingest directly from your online storage. So this extended online is a way to get in there. Now, that same thing you talked about facilities where they might have multiple facilities. The key here is this extended online can live in all your facilities. So when you replicate your workflow in these facilities, the difference is the extended online can be in each one of these facilities, and it will talk to itself in the background. And it is much more efficient to be able to replicate the content, what we call spreading the content. Again, putting little spots, those little 50 little dots, putting them in different boxes around the world than it would be if you were to copy files. And even with tools like WAN accelerators and other tools, they're not as efficient in moving files as we are in moving objects. So the beauty of object storage and the way Lattice object storage with extended online is that we move objects across a WAN or across a wide area network, whether it's the internet or a dedicated channel. We can move these objects anywhere in the world and spread the content so that all your facilities can have the same content, or you can have multiple copies of the content in other facilities and do it in a seamless manner and virtually with no impact on your regular online work. Because one of the problems people have always had, you know this, guys, having to install this, is that we used to have this thing in the IT world called the backup window. Remember that?
Yeah.
People go home at night and it's 5 o'clock and everybody runs out and they all come in at 8 in the morning and all their files are backed up. Well, that was great. It's still great if you're just doing emails. But in our world, first of all, things happen 24/7. And second of all, the files are so big, they may take 4 days to back up. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you make a copy of something that takes 4 days to copy if you only have 8 hours? And so there's no such thing as a backup window. So you have to be able to deliver that same level of performance and still be able to archive and make copies, secondary copies of your content at the same time. And the problem was when we tried to sneak things in after the backup window, we would hurt the performance of the primary system. As I said earlier, there's different aspects to a media and entertainment workflow and storage than there is to something that you'd use, for your email server or your IT. And where IT is concerned with IOPS, meaning moving lots of small files, and you can kind of get away with that, right? If I want to move lots of small files between other small files, I can kind of sneak those in. But the problem is when you're trying to deliver streams of files, such as you have in media entertainment, and you try to sneak other streams in the middle, it usually is very disruptive, and it causes things like drop frames and applications to crash. And that usually is on the scale of disaster movie. That's a disaster movie scale for a customer, because the old joke in television production is what happens when we go to black screen? People get fired, right?
Yeah.
And what happens in the real world is the customer changes channels. So you never want to have that happen. And object storage is a way to extend the online, give the user a sense of having and a true feeling that they have multiple copies out there. They do it in a way that, believe it or not, is less expensive than online storage, and they do it in a way that adds increased resiliency, so more safety in the overall, and they can do it in a geographic area.
Sure.
Sounds like magic, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you're really speaking to the the flexibility and the scalability of these offerings. That's really awesome.
And how does it do this, people? Math. But that's about that's
pretty
about
much.
all
It's
I can
math.
describe, right? Like I know it's math and science, but that's all. When people are like, "Well, how does that work?" I go, "Math," and then I'm like, "That should be a satisfactory answer."
Yeah, and the funny thing is, if you look at Starnet 5, it's over 3 million lines of code. And it's not 3 million lines of code because we can share a file between, 10 or 100 or 1,000 users. It's 3 million lines of code because it manages all the other stuff that needs to be done in the background in this magic manner. It's doing all the hard work for you, and it's making it all seamless. And that is one of the things that quantum has had, and Skip and I have seen this for a long time, one of the biggest advantages that you have over everybody else is that we own all the pieces, and we've been able to work for years to put all those pieces together so they just work. So, I mean, it as an integration company, that you have your favorites you pick, and you do that because they're going to work together. I mean, when someone says, can I put a lemon and an avocado together with a tomato, you go, well, it might not taste as good as, a raspberry and a blueberry and a watermelon, And
it depends if you like guacamole, Alex. I don't know.
I was thinking of that as I said that. I go, that sounds really good. What I'm having for lunch now, a little guac. But realistically, that's there's some truth to the ability of saying that things just work better when they work. And quantum has a unique position of having an ecosystem that works together, but in a way that everything's open. So there's an open standard. You were talking, Nick, about APIs. That is the open standard glue that makes everything just work together. So we write one API that works with everything we have, and it makes it so much easier for the application vendor to just make it all work together, that they get done faster. It's easy to troubleshoot any things they would ever have, and it gives the customer the flexibility to do what they want. So it's complex. I won't say it's not complex, but it's less complex than having to worry about what do I do when I get a black screen.
And the other thing is it's complexity on the back end in order to achieve simplicity on the front end.
Right.
Yep. Well said. Absolutely.
I go back to that old Apple thing that says it's really hard to make things easy.
That's exactly right. And I mean, it seems like that's very much a spirit you guys have taken with you from the Apple side, right? It's all about let's make these things that make people's lives easier in this particular segment, this particular space. We're going to put all sorts of thought and engineering and mathematics and development and, all of that into it on the backside, because it is complex, but all to achieve a level of simplicity and fluidity and efficiency for the people who have to bang on it all day long and rely on it and all of that.
What are some other new developments you guys have going on there? I mean, you've talked about StoreNext 5 and Storage Manager and how they work together and how that works with Lattice. You want to talk a little bit about the hardware, some of the platforms that you're using to sort of extend those platforms?
Yeah, and any just other developments people might want to keep their eyes open for, just coming out of quantum. You have these pro solution bundles, but is there anything else coming down the pike that maybe is worth just paying attention to, and what might people be seeing coming out of quantum, and just kind of the new the current agenda?
Absolutely. So we're coming back from IBC, and at IBC we announced a new StoreNext Pro solution, and a StoreNext Pro solution is essentially a integrated solution of existing quantum technology to meet a specific need. So there's a StoreNext Pro solution for XSAN, people who are upgrading from XSAN environments. There's one called StoreNext Pro 4K for people that want to add 4K editing into their environment. And there was a third called StoreNext Pro Production that was aimed at people that want to capture this end-to-end content management that we were talking about. So we added another called StoreNext Pro Workgroup that is designed to flexibly allow people to share that content across their organization. So that was our newest StoreNext Pro solution, but probably the bigger news at IBC was something called StoreNext Connect. So StoreNext Connect was a way to, is software that will be installed on these StoreNext Pro solutions that allows you to finally take all of these different components throughout this whole solution and gather it into one sort of, call it a pane of glass, or one place to manage the entire environment. So it helps you as integrators and as customers managing a whole environment to look at not just how one individual say, RAID system is performing or one individual client is behaving, but look at all the clients across the entire solution.
This
I have to
sounds
say,
familiar.
I saw this.
A little bit,
A
huh?
couple of weeks ago, and I was geeking out. I was pretty happy with it.
It reminds me much of a development that had kind of been in progress at a former enterprise of your guys.
Yeah, funny how that works.
But I'm ecstatic about this new development. You know,
Oh, good one.
sorry.
It's funny, yeah.
But no,
We'll
this does
yeah.
derive from kind of a mission you guys have been on for a while, right? You know, there
Right.
was this thing that I think some people knew and even saw kind of glimpses of at Active that was, a very integrative, pane of glass admin console for the system as a whole. And because you guys can control the entire stack, you have the ability to do that in a way that I think is very attractive to people who have to be monitoring system performance from top to bottom. And don't always get that if they have many vendors at the table, or just frankly, those admin consoles, like, if you're building out your own custom, Nagios implementation, there's just a ton of time and energy. And so it's great to hear that that's, kind of carried through to, your activities at Quantum. And, I know that'll make our lives easier. Definitely will make our customers' lives way easier. They're basically asking us for these types of things.
Yep.
You bet. So guys, tell me if this resonates with you. I've always thought that when you're setting up one of these solutions, and maybe it's to, as we say it, for 4K, or you're integrating storage manager across a real production work or content workflow, I always thought that in order for one piece of software to try and address everything that you do, that it needs to operate in these three different modes. And this concept is carried through, obviously it's something that we did with Active Stats, but also is you can see in Starnet Connect. And the first is that when you're setting up an environment, you need to discover exactly what's out there. What's on the wire? Can I see all the different pieces that comprise the solution? And that's a very, back in the day, Alex, you can help me with this. Steve Jobs used to talk about the lean forward kind of experience and the lean back kind of experience.
Right.
And he always said that, that a portable or a workstation is a lean forward experience, and an iPad is more of a lean back experience. It's hard to interact or create a lot of content on an iPad. So in the same way, when you're using this software, you're in an interrogative kind of mode where you're discovering everything in the environment. And then you flip to a new mode once you've identified everything to configure it and set it up. And if you could configure, say, for example, all of your clients all at once, or all of your metadata controllers or gateway controllers at once, that's where you want to do this sort of manage. So it's discover first, then manage. And finally, once everything's set up the way you like and the customer is happy and up and running, you're in this sort of lean back mode of just monitoring.
Report, yeah.
Absolutely. And then you want to drive
Until
reports.
something breaks, Skip.
Yes.
And then immediately you need to know exactly what's going on, right?
Absolutely. And you need to be able to flip between these different modes periodically. So that's something that I think a lot of people haven't cracked, how to do that and how to accommodate all those different ways of working. And that's what's fun about Starnet Connect.
Well, that's exactly right. And again, we have to kind of scratch our heads to figure out how best to build, the deployment strategy and the automation tools to help do the deployments. Figure out what's even in front of us, manage it across groups and different silos, of different stacks of equipment. And then that reporting is just huge, right? And you want it to be proactive, but you don't want to see every little chirp from, SNMP that might happen, or you're going to literally be flooded with thousands of emails per hour, right? You need to have this, 30,000 foot view on the systems that's smart enough to be proactive about alerting you to issues that you really truly need to be aware of, right? Like what's impacting user performance, what's impacting viability and availability of the volume, what's impacting workflow or performance in a way that people are going to feel and have big flashing red lights and alarms that go off, so to speak, to alert you of those types of scenarios, and give us other tools, obviously, to get more under the hood. But, it's hard to come up with those abstraction layers that kind of see a bunch of inputs, as something that they can then make more abstract and give you this big one flashing light that really only flashes based on types of circumstances that really call for you needing to be alerted in that type of a way, that proactively, that in a sense disruptively, but you want to be proactively disrupted when it's sensing that it meets a certain set of conditions. That's great, and it's obvious that you guys listen and are aware of the real on-the-ground realities for people dealing with these systems, because you're focused on things like this. And this is really where the evolution of the needs is clearly going. And again, I don't think everyone, unless they had some of the very unique backgrounds that you guys have, would be bringing that level of awareness into trying to solve those problems. Because to me as an integrator, it seems really obvious, but you get a lot of egghead storage vendors, and I don't think they identify the same set of needs that you guys do. You do it from a very user-centric experience, even if that user is an admin or a creative director or an integrator like Chesapeake Systems who's engaged with our clients from a support model perspective. You're serving our needs, and it's the reason why you guys are tied to the hip with us as one of our absolutely most strategic vendor relationships, bar none, no question.
That's great. You guys definitely get it, and you understand what's meant by the term. One of my favorite terms is intuitively obvious. you just know it. It makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nick, this will sound really familiar to you, but I think it resonates with almost everyone if you just think about it a little bit, is that in all that chatter you're talking about, you really don't care so much about notifications. You care about warning. Notifications you can sort through whenever you want through. Warnings are important, and knowing what is important and what's not important is really the key. And being able to put an emphasis on what's important and de-emphasize what's not important is what we tried to do at Starnet Connect. And one more thing that Skip touched on, but I want to hit really hard on really quickly, is the idea that Starnet Connect aggregates the information you need to know based on the way you have built the system. So for instance, you talked a lot about LUNs and individual disks and individual drives, and that's really cool, and that's the way most people who haven't been in the business, or maybe they haven't worked for Apple for a number of years and they don't have that sense of it, but they tend to look at it and go, here's exactly what this box does, and that box does, and this box does. But we both know that part of that box will be on one volume, and part of that box will be in another volume, and a volume may spread across 10 of those boxes or 2 of those boxes. And what you care about is the performance of that volume that's connected to those clients, not those individual boxes. So what we've done with Starnet Connect, and again, it'll seem very familiar to you, is what we've done is we've aggregated the performance, the information, the warnings, all that into the individual performance of those volumes, not the boxes. So it's a much more useful tool at a glance than it would be for you to have to do that math thing and figure out what to throw away and what to keep. And to me, it's about setting that performance initially and tuning it, and then maintaining it, and then, God forbid, if something bad happens, how do I get back to that perfect state again? And knowing that, and knowing that most of our users are not full-time IT people, or this isn't all they do for a living, knowing that that's the case, they have other better things to do than have to read 100-page manuals. So we try to make this a lot easier and a lot more intuitive, as Skip says.
That's fantastic. And again, it's you guys are looking at solving these problems from a solutions perspective. There's other people who sell RAIDs, there's other people who sell NAS, there's other people who sell storage of one flavor or another. But I think there's no other party addressing storage and just data needs, on a solutions level, specifically for people dealing with the challenges of media file types and workflows like you guys are. You just don't see that level of attention and energy being put into those things that, are clearly being developed out of an understanding of the space and its unique set of requirements. Any timeline for seeing a realization of these things, as a tool that's part of our arsenal, actively, or is there, is it a little more just TBD at this point, and this is kind of in development background right now?
So I would say that what you're going to do is you're going to see Starnet Connect in the December timeframe in the Starnet Pro Solutions, and you're going to see us drive towards one more thing, which I believe makes the most sense, and you're going to see this over the next few months, is the idea that we're taking everything we've learned about high performance solutions, about taking technologies that were formerly very, very expensive, and we've been able to make them more affordable and match them to smaller organizations, and we will continue to do that. You'll see us drive down the cost of entry of these solutions, similar to what we did at Apple. If you think about it, we drove that cost down of someone to be able to have shared storage. We're doing that again here, and what we're trying to do is really not only just drive the cost down as some people do by using less connected components or taking generic, call it horizontal storage boxes and making them fit, right? I mean, if you try hard enough, you can fit that round peg in a square hole. You need a bigger hammer. And that's what people try to do. Instead, we're taking what we've learned about tuning and optimization and being able to size things correctly. And we've been able to lower the price. And you saw that with Starnet Pro Solutions, by offering service spares kits where people don't have to, wait for someone to come and pay expensive service for someone to be there in 4 hours. We put them there so that, Chesapeake could grab a service spare off the shelf and plug it in the system or tell the customer off the phone how to get it running right away. You've seen us change the model of the way we started licensing the products, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that coming towards the end of the year, and you'll see us drive that cost out and build systems that are more scalable from the bottom up.
That's
if I can
fantastic.
say it that way.
That's great. It sounds like it's going to be an exciting 2015, and a 2015 that probably will bring, even more of Quantum's offerings into an even larger set of our users' hands, which we've been pushing on for ages. We're thrilled to hear about. One thing I'll mention, and guys, just thank you so much for all the time today, the insight, which is always as deep and informed as anyone will ever hear from anyone in this industry. So it's much appreciated, you guys being guests today. But one thing I'll say to our listeners, stay tuned through Chesapeake Systems' website. You'll hear soon about some upcoming events and other activities with Quantum that will, again, not just be focused on this is some cool stuff to make a really cool hard drive icon on your desktop. It's going to be deeper level demonstrations that are very workflow oriented, very oriented around how you can use this bevy of technologies that we've been talking about today to frankly achieve new workflow possibilities and actually tie that to the day-to-day lives of your users. And so we have some upcoming stuff that should probably be getting announced relatively soon that again is probably closer to end of the year time frame. Hopefully not too close to the holidays. We'll try to make it convenient for people. But it should be very exciting, and again, it'll be Chesapeake Systems and Quantum and probably some other vendors in the MAM space all coming together to really show this stuff off and open people's eyes to what does all of this stuff when pieced together really allow the users. It's not just to be cool, and it's not just so people can spend a ton of money. It's this now achieves something new that you couldn't do before, and it's as easy and inexpensive and elegant to deploy as it's ever been. So we're thrilled to continue to work with you guys closely as a partner, and it just, again, sounds like wonderful things are in store that make you guys even more relevant than you've been and even more relevant to a greater set of people in this world, which is great. We love having Quantum in people's lives amongst our client base. It's something we're very comfortable supporting and representing to people.
Well, keep pushing us, guys, and we'll keep trying to deliver the best we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Guys,
thanks for having us. Guys.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for your
much.
time.
Take care, and thank you for listening to episode 301 of The Workflow Show. And again, we want to thank so much to Alex and Skip and all the folks at Quantum for being on today. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
The Workflow Show is a production of Chesapeake Systems. We welcome your comments and suggestions for upcoming episodes. You can email us at workflowshow@chesa.com. That's workflowshow@chesa.com. And if you'd like to talk with a member of our team of experts about your particular digital media workflow needs, email us at prosales@chesa.com. That's prosales@chesa.com. Or call us at 410-752-3406. That's 410-752-3406. We appreciate your listening to The Workflow Show, and we'll catch you next time.